Both sides of the political aisle would agree that some forms of government assistance are both good and necessary for those in need. But there has also long been a bipartisan consensus that such assistance should be tied to certain expectations. Single adults, for example, are expected to work or participate in education for at least 20 hours a week in order to collect food stamps. And this makes sense. Citizenship comes with responsibility. But there is an effort underway to remove these work expectations altogether and thus to expand the welfare state beyond what is financially reasonable and morally acceptable. With me to break this down is the American Enterprise Institute's Matt Weidinger. With me today is Matt Weidinger, a senior fellow and Rowe Scholar for the American Enterprise Institute, who writes about the importance of work requirements and how efforts to remove them have entered the liberal mainstream in a new op-ed for the Washington Examiner. Matt, thanks very much for being with us today. You've talked extensively about the importance of work requirements for welfare programs. Can you explain why these requirements are so important, not just for economic reasons, but also for social and moral ones?
Sure. So work requirements as a general principle were one of the key themes of welfare reforms that were actually bipartisan and signed into law by Bill Clinton in the 1990s. And they basically say, with regard to major federal benefit programs targeted towards low-income families, that the benefit should be somewhat reciprocal, that individuals have an obligation to do something in exchange for the benefits. So work requirements is a little bit of a, I wouldn't call it a misnomer, but it's a very shortened term. There's actually 13 or 12 different definitions of work under the work requirement provisions of our cash welfare program. And they include things like work, job search, participating in education and training, that sort of thing. And basically what it says is that taxpayers are right to expect individuals to do something in exchange for benefits, but the individual really benefits as well because it's directed towards not remaining on the benefit rolls and actually going to work and supporting their families on their own. So that's kind of the basic motivating premise. Conservatives for a long time have suggested applying more work requirements to more benefit programs. Not surprisingly, liberals have a different view, and they're generally opposed to work requirements, arguing that things like we should just give people cash and people will be able to decide best for themselves what to do with that.
And of course, those requirements are more lax for certain groups, such as those with pregnancy.
Yep.
But you mentioned that single young adults are those who are expected to abide by the strictest work requirements. And usually efforts to remove those requirements are found in more left-wing socialist causes, such as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal, which you mentioned in your op-ed. So why are those things now appearing in more of the liberal mainstream?
So I think this basically reflects on how the liberal mainstream has moved more liberal, right? So the Democrat Party, I don't think it's going to be surprised to anybody, has sort of moved more to the left. And so those voices are louder and there's more of them within the Democrat coalition. I'm old enough to not remember anybody claiming to be a democratic socialist as a member of the Democrat coalition, but now there are a number of people that do that, and they have very loud voices, and they seem to somewhat be driving the debate on issues like this.
And you argue as well that a rejection of work requirements for welfare is actually a rejection of the American dream and the idea that we do work for what we want and that we should work towards that. Can you explain more about that?
Sure. There's lots of different definitions of the American dream. I'm the son of immigrants, and they came to this country to work, and they view this as a tremendous opportunity. I think most people sort of associate the American dream with work and pursuing your sort of opportunity. And that generally is not something dispensed by government benefit programs. But, like I said, we have sort of a growing number of people that think that that's not only the federal government's potential role, but actually its responsibility. And so, I think that's at odds with a common understanding of the American dream that's reflected in, we have a 5% unemployment rate, which means that about 95% of people go to work every day and they pay taxes and support benefit programs. And I think it's reasonable for them to suggest that there's some reciprocality on the part of recipients, and that's where you get into these discussions about work requirements and the merits of that.
Absolutely, and it's an important topic, and as you mentioned, it was a bipartisan one up until very recently. Well, thank you very much, Matt, for being here. We very much so appreciate it. It's an issue that we're going to keep an eye on here. Thank you very much for watching as well. This has been Restoring America, and for more, be sure to visit WashingtonExaminer.com.